Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We are talking all about 3 reasons writing instruction cannot be a one size fits all concept. So I am happy you are here. Let's go ahead and jump right in. If you are catching the replay, go ahead and type replay, ask any questions that you would like, and I will be answering those. And I will be, after the live, adding some links into the chat as well, so they're easy to just copy and paste. So let's dive right into today's lesson. So I want to speak to the pain points of the old method or the old way of teaching, or should be the old way of teaching. Per our school district and per who we work for does determine what we do, throughout the classroom and the expectations. But back in the day, I would say that curriculum was more scripted and more robotic. If you ever had an experience like I did, that was my first school. That was when I was 21. I started teaching, and it was my first job. I thought it was amazing, which it was. We all have to start somewhere. But the whole entire district was explicitly direct instruction. So it's different from direct instruction, which is different from differentiated instruction. It was explicitly direct instruction. Basically, what that meant was everything we did throughout the day was scripted. So more or less, you felt like a robot. So you would say this per what the book said, and the students would reply with this. And so it was very much scripted. And if the students didn't respond in that way per the manual, you would start over and start the process again. And as a new teacher, that was wonderful. I didn't know any better. And there was no planning at that point. But quickly over time, quickly as I had that experience, I started to feel like there was no creativity. It became boring. The students were not engaged. And so that was more of an approach back when I started. And I wouldn't say per se that curriculum is scripted word for word, verbatim, but it is more or less in the margins of our curriculum saying, you need to do this. And it's very boxed in, very canned. So that is one thing I'm going to be speaking to today. The other piece is being a one size fits all approach. So basically, we have blanket, instruction that we provide our kids. We have blanket assignments. We give everybody the same assignment, and everyone is supposed to work in the same way, and everyone is supposed to produce the same way, when we cannot do that because we have all of these different experiences and levels and learning styles and all of these things within our classroom. So we can't continue to teach the one size fits all. Now, with the lack of time that teachers have and the high expectations that they have of all the things that they need to get accomplished throughout the year before those littles leave the classroom, it makes it much more difficult to have not a one size fits all, right? It's kind of begins to feel like it is a checkoff system where, okay, I have to get this done. So we're going to do it today. And then we got it done to an extent. I'm going to check it off because that is kind of how teachers are feeling. And then the other pain point we need to speak to is that what we are provided with to this day, in my opinion, is not engaging. Now, that's not to say that teachers are not making it engaging, but the curriculum that we have handed to us does not lend itself to be engaging to these students. So these are some old ways of how teachers were delivering per what they were provided with. And again, depending on where you work, some of this is still applicable today. So what we want to make sure is that we are turning the one size fits all approach, and we're turning it into differentiated. We need to turn it into confident, opportunities for our students to be confident. And then also that they want to continue that student success. They want to continue on that road to success because of their confidence. And so that's what our goal is. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. So, first off, the goal of today's live is to talk about how to differentiate, how to build confidence, and how to build that retention. And retention meaning, how do we keep our kids wanting to come back? And specifically to writing is what we're speaking to. But how do we keep that retention so that they keep wanting to write and they want to stay engaged and all these things? And so that's what we're going to be speaking to today. And I say all these things because I understand it. I lived it. I was there. As I said in the beginning, I came from a completely robotic approach when I first joined the teaching world. And so I was over time very frustrated and I got tired. After the first 5 years of my teaching, I questioned, why did I choose this profession? I love the kids. I say that to this day. But what I was handed was not all that motivating. And then because I wasn't getting students' responses and students engaged, I started feeling insecure with my skills as a teacher. And it became annoying and it was hopeless. And, it was like, yeah, what am I going to do next? And after the first 5 years, that's exactly the approach and the question I was asking myself. And it wasn't until 5 years later where I learned about this very approach that I speak highly about and I've tweaked over the years, that now I have become confident with teaching writing and I am motivated to teach writing. It's not something that is, ugh, I hate my writing time, right? Matter of fact, I do it every day, all day. That's all I teach is writing now. There was a lot of clarity. I was encouraged and I felt successful. And it wasn't just me that felt confident, motivated, had clarity. It was the students as well. So it was a win-win. So when I say all of these things, it's because I speak to those pain points that I dealt with when I was in the classroom. So if we haven't met, my name is Christy. I am the CEO, owner of Created to Teach, and I help elementary teachers systematize their writing instruction so that they can produce engaged, motivated, and successful student writers. And if you have not grabbed this free download, you feel free to do that. I'll put it in the chat here or up on the screen, and I'll put the link afterwards. But these bookmarks I've talked about in the lives that we've done, this was one of the approaches that I was able to get students writing and engaged to write. So that is there for you for the taking if you choose to grab those. I do have other lives that talk about how we use those as well. So let's go and talk about the how. How do we differentiate what we already have? That's what I want to speak to is how can we change our current situation with what we have? How do we differentiate? So here are some examples. Now, differentiation sounds scary and it's not, and it sounds like it's a lot of prep, but it's not. And it just takes time to adjust. But here's some ways that you can differentiate your instruction. Again, we're going to be speaking to writing specifically. So how you go about students getting their ideas to paper, right? Do they want to use markers? Do they use a color code system? Do you want to use stickers? Do you want to use Post-its, right? That is an example of differentiating. You could differentiate how much you expect your students to do in that assignment. Maybe you deliver your lesson to whole class, but what the expectation is from that particular student or those students in your classroom may be differentiated. Maybe you're expecting more from a student that works at a higher grade level and vice versa. You can differentiate by when you are practicing to teach the proofreading skill and the editing skill. You don't just give everybody the same passage to correct. You can give them differentiated passages to correct so that it's at their level. You can, when you're building sentences, if you're working on sentences with your students, instead of just saying, hey, you need to write a complete sentence, that's not a complete sentence, give them the scaffolding that they need first. So instead of just saying we're going to write sentences, engage them with silly pictures and make them laugh, engage them, let them be creative with what they see on that screen. What do they come up with? Talk about the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives in that picture, that silly picture you share with them. And then as you are teaching sentences, maybe to the younger students or even to those that are older, we've missed so much education lately that we know that our students are struggling and are years behind. And so we need to meet them where they are. I know there's these expectations of where we need to have them, but the reality is they need those foundations. And so if they are struggling with sentences, maybe that's something you differentiate. One student may be able to write a complete sentence with no scaffolding. Maybe a student needs a word bank of words divided into nouns, verbs, adjectives, all the parts of speech. And so there's scaffolding things that we can differentiate. Okay. And so there's ways to go about this with what you already have. And it doesn't mean that has all these new things have to be created. It just means that take what you have and just tweak it a little bit. Just differentiate it. Maybe how you approach your lessons. Those are things, all sorts of things. Get the kids up, get them talking to each other. Okay, there are all types of ways we can differentiate. So, going back to that first slide when I was talking about curriculum being scripted and robotic, we want to make sure that we give students an opportunity to give us their own ideas, not these canned responses, but their own ideas from their own experiences. And so, when, like I say, you're showing them this picture, these silly pictures, allow them to be creative. That's empowering when we let them be creative. The next question is how? How do we build confidence? The how about confidence. How do we get our students to be confident? If they've had no exposure to writing, or they've had exposure to writing but just never felt confident because one, they didn't have the foundations, maybe they weren't celebrated in their ideas, maybe they didn't have the opportunity to share their experiences versus the typical writing prompt that is a blanket prompt that everyone's writing off of, right? So, how do we build confidence in our students so that they will want to write? So, again, one size does not fit all. And I bring this up and make it a little bit bigger. I bring this up as far as the journal prompts go. So, a lot of times we have these list of journal prompts that we have just so that kids can journal write or free write, things like that. But we have to be careful when we are providing students with writing prompts, these canned writing prompts. For example, the first one on the left side there says, do you get an allowance? Okay, do you get an allowance? How does it work? Okay, if I were to give that to my whole entire class to write on, and you have a student in your classroom that their family cannot afford allowance or afford a lot of things for that matter, that right there is going to put them into a slump. And they're immediately going to shut down because they cannot relate. And then they start doing this comparison thing, right? Especially when students are getting excited about, how much money they get and this, that, and the other thing. And it just quickly brings on the shutdown mode. Another example on there, let's see. Okay, what are your 3 favorite movies? Now, it doesn't mean that kids, I'm not saying that not all kids have these experiences, but some don't. Some do not. I'll take, for example, I teach a lot of homeschool students, and a majority of their day, they do not even turn on the screen. And so if I'm trying to talk about, make conversation about a movie or a show or something to that effect, they can't relate because they don't watch movies. So we have to be really, really careful with what we provide our students as far as those canned type of prompts, because what works for one student or half of your students does not mean it's working for every student. So we have to be really careful with that. So those are some examples with that. Another example of why a one size does not fit all, if you take a look at that writing prompt, or I'm sorry, the writing rubric there, that's a writing rubric for second grade through fifth grade. You cannot group second graders, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders together. We should not be doing that. And I know that this happens a lot in the school system. And so we need to be careful with that. And then another example on this page is that we might say, here's your paper, everybody, here's your assignment, this is what you're going to do. And you hand everybody a specific writing paper that maybe you have. And I was guilty of this too. We had binder paper. Now, most kiddos can do that, but we have to be careful because that is an assumption. One size does not fit all. Some students can do binder paper perfectly, fine. But then there's those other students that they need the graph paper because they can't space their letters. They're still struggling with spacing. Or they need those lines in the middle to be able to create that lowercase from that uppercase. Or maybe they need a visual where it's highlighted. The lower part is highlighted. So it just depends on everybody's need. And while we can't realistically, I know it's hard to say that, we have to serve everybody's needs. We really can by just making these few tweaks. And I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference if we meet our students where they're at. So these are examples of how a one size cannot fit all, but it's a lot of typical things that we are dealt with in the classroom. And then the last how question I want to address is how to build retention. So not so much do they remember, but how to build retention in that. How do they keep coming back for more? How, maybe this writing assignment went really well, but next week, I don't know if it's going to go okay. How do we keep them engaged and motivated to continue? And the answer is they need to have the confidence. They need to have the confidence so that they know that they're good enough to continue on to the next assignment. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about how when lessons are not engaging or they're blanket assignments or the one size fits all, okay, we cannot produce confident students from that. So for example, I say, all right, here is your writing assignment. You're going to go ahead and think about a gift you received. Red flag number one. Maybe they haven't received a gift. We can't assume that everybody has. All right. You're going to tell about a gift and a friendly letter. Okay. So maybe they know how to write a friendly letter, maybe not. You're going to write to your friend. Do they have a friend? Okay. And then the writing directions, think about a present or gift someone has given you, and you're going to write a letter describing that gift. So you give this writing assignment. Okay. Now, mind you, because of the lack of time and the lack of engagement and our history and our experiences with our students that they go into shutdown mode, we just skipped the whole part of the writing process, really. We're really just working on the draft right now. We didn't pre-write. We didn't get our ideas on paper. We're just doing the assignment. We're just getting it down. And again, this is how teachers are feeling. This is what's going on in the classroom. They're just trying to get things done. One, so they can give their kids exposure, but also to get it done. But we're not able to go through the process in which these kids need to continue to get them engaged and continue to allow them to feel success. And so this example is typical. Here's your assignment. And it's typically not going through the writing process. So no pre-writing. So here's the assignment. Start getting your ideas down. And then when you're finished, turn it in. So here she is turning in her paper, looking totally insecure, not knowing if I did it right, but we got it done, turning it in. And then after that, nothing happens a lot of times. A lot of times, things don't happen where we don't talk about the editing and the revising process. A lot of times, teachers will just grade it real quick because they have to get to the next assignment. And so, what's happening is that the only part of the writing process that's gotten taken care of is the rough draft, but the kids never got to revise or edit their own work to see why, they were able to problem solve on their own and catch their own mistakes. And so they are turning this in, and then they may see it again, they may not, but more times than not, they don't take it to the final draft stage, right? And this is what happens in the classroom by not the teacher's fault. It's what they're dealt with, what they are handed. And so we want to talk about how we can avoid that and how can we start engaging our students so that they feel successful. So here's an example. Instead of doing all of that, why don't we could teach the whole class. Okay. You don't have to create all these various lessons so that you can group your kids together. You do whole class instruction. So today we're going to talk about how to write a fictional narrative. Okay. And you're teaching about what a fictional narrative is and the things that it includes. And you're engaging them with fun pictures and asking them their experiences. Maybe they're getting up and doing an activity, whole class. And then they go through that first part of the writing process where they're getting their ideas on paper. But how they get their ideas on paper is determined based off the student's level and where they are. So maybe this kiddo has more ideas, and then this child, has some reasons and so or some parts of the paper that they're doing. And you can see this over here. There's not any red there in that third example of the jotting there. It's the pre-write. It's the overall concept. But what they're doing is they're getting their ideas on paper. They're being allowed to get their ideas on paper, and they get to choose their topic. They get to choose their topic based off the fictional narrative, but they get to be creative. Okay. And then after that, after they get their ideas down, then another day is going to be the rough draft. Everybody's working on the rough draft the next day, but everybody's working at their own level. Same objective, but different level. So they work on their rough draft maybe the next day. Okay. We are now focusing on what revising and editing is. And we're going to switch our papers maybe. We're going to do whatever you choose to do for that process, but not any part of the writing process is skipped. So at the end of this, here's what happens. Here's how we get confident students. They were able to take their ideas in their head that they want to write about, and they've been empowered because they have been told that your idea is great. Whatever's in your head, get it on paper. It is good enough to put on paper. Okay, that's just the beginning. Then when you were doing the whole class instruction, you weren't isolating students and, well, you go over here because you need this. It doesn't isolate. You're part of this class. So you have whole group instruction. Then they're able to get the confidence because they've been empowered to share their own ideas in their pre-writing and brainstorming stage. We call it jotting. And then they learn how to go from the jotting or the pre-writing stage to the rough draft. And what's happening is they're excited and they've got buy-in because they are creating and writing about their own idea that they created. And then they start to see that from this pre-writing stage, they've stretched these into sentences. I could write a sentence. Now I've got a paragraph, right? And they just become super confident. And using this 3-step method that I use all the time is so empowering And it's so simple, actually, once the students get to understand what it is, because the process will always be the same no matter what the genre is. And so understanding that system and how it works produces this confidence, because at the end of it, they have a product at the end. Hey, I wrote this fictional narrative. I wrote this fictional narrative, my own ideas. I got my thoughts to paper. Everyone's celebrating my ideas. I'm getting confident. I now have a paragraph or two or three based off what student you're talking about. But at the end of it, they have a product. So they feel successful. And if they feel successful and they feel confident, they're going to keep writing. You are going to be able to keep that retention of them coming back and writing next week because they were able to celebrate the product that they did the week before. And so at the end of this, we all need rubrics just to kind of measure, yes, how the students are doing. And it helps for problem solving for independent writers. They are able to look and see kind of where they need to be. That's always great. But I don't want to say at the end of this, their goal is to get this A+ paper or a 4 or whatever, however you grade it. But really, I feel that if our students are empowered, equipped, and feeling elevated, that trumps any A+. Because remember, the confidence, all of that is going to overtake any grade. They're not going to remember the grade. They're going to remember how they feel and how they felt after accomplishing that. And they can take the credit for that. I did that from start to finish. So that is what we can take that approach instead. So a few things that I talked about is the writing process of getting their ideas on paper and stretching it to a rough draft and going through the revising and editing process. So you can grab this also. This is a little vault that I've created, and it takes the students through that just brain dumping. Just get all your ideas on paper based off the genre you're working on. Then, go ahead and outline it per the level they're working, and then the rough draft, and then they're able to go through the revising and editing. So you can grab that at that URL there. And if you have not yet heard about the course that we are going to be launching and opening up in June 20th to be exact, I'd love for you to join the waitlist. It's called Crack the Writing Code. And in that course, it's going to be an online digital writing course for teachers. And so you can check that out at that website. If you'd like to join us, you'll be updated through email as we get closer and closer. And so I'm so excited about that, because everything I talk about in all of my lives, it will be included in that course. And it's made so much difference in so many students' lives and how they write. And it's awesome to be able to serve those families and be a part of that. So grab the wait list on there. We have some fun, exciting, and interactive things. You got the bingo card there, various things you can do. And then we will do a drawing and all of that good stuff. So at the end of this, we want to make sure that our students, like I mentioned, are equipped with what they need, the foundations, all the things that they need so that they can feel empowered, getting confident, and then they are elevated so that they have that retention to continue on the process of success. And so no more dog and pony shows, no more meltdowns. This is huge. It's key. It's key. It's key. I cannot say it enough. If you have not joined our Facebook group, it is under Elementary Writing Strategies. It's a teacher community. It is a private group. So if you can fill out the questions prior to joining us, that would be wonderful. And if you have any specific topics that you would like me to touch on in future Fridays, go ahead and drop those in there as well. And of course, if you have any questions. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you guys next week. Until then, see you later.